The guy that has just been all over the trade market at this point this season is John Collins, right? It feels like this is the year for John, right?
Who knows? I mean, between Miles Turner and John Collins, they're really getting their frequent fake trade flyer miles for a while. And part of the reason with John Collins is the idea that it's pretty well understood now that he's an awkward fit with the Hawks, just because John Collins is a wonderful pick and roll player, but they use the center a lot in those actions, and you can only do so many double drags. So the idea that Collins could go somewhere where he could be more heavily featured is definitely a sales pitch. And Collins now being under contract, so he's making 23.5 this year, 25.3 the following year, and then 26.6 before a player option. So he's under contract. I think that's more in the line of a reasonable deal rather than a super team friendly one. So I think part of the reason we hear a lot about John Collins is that Collins, I'm assuming, would like to be traded, and the Hawks would rather have him probably than not, but they would also be willing to move in a different direction. The problem is, I brought up before, typically the way this works is you trade a good player for draft assets or something else. I don't think that's necessarily what the Hawks want. They just gave up a bunch for DeJounte Murray. The idea that they're going to more fully change course is hard. So maybe you try to use a third team, or maybe there's somebody who does more of a like for like, but just could use John Collins.
That's what I'm so glad you brought up the idea of what a structure of a John Collins trade would look like. To me, it would almost have to be like a 3-team construction for it to make sense, where like the team acquiring Collins is giving up picks, and then the Hawks are sending the picks to another team in order to get someone that helps them now that also fits their age timeline. It's just hard to figure out who that is, I guess, for me.
Well, and Sam, if you want to make it even harder, you're looking for potentially like a small forward. Who's giving up a small forward right now? Like it's so challenging to make this work. It's a part of why I really didn't like the Hawks committing to 2 guards, and as well as Clint Capella's played, and they have a Onyeka Okongwu, it kind of has to be a 3 or 4 because everything else doesn't really make sense. So it's a very challenging circumstance, and Atlanta also doesn't have a ton of salary flexibility because they're barely below the luxury tax threshold this year, and they have a lot of expenditures moving forward. Remember, DeAndre Hunter's extension is kicking in. So the idea that if they're trading Collins and trying to stay even from a talent perspective, that's a brutally hard needle to thread for Landry Fields.
Yeah. A team that has come up for him and a team that is apparently in the market for a 4-man is the Brooklyn Nets. And that makes a lot of sense to me. It's just that, like, I don't know how that works at the end of the day. Like, that's what I keep coming back to with the Nets. And I'm glad that our friend Nekias Duncan is here, because the teams that I actually wonder if they can make a move for John Collins are teams like the Rockets, Thunder, Jazz. Nekias just brought up in the comments the Rockets or Thunder. I wonder if it's a team like that that is really, really looking to try and find a longer-term piece that can be almost like a veteran presence for them. I actually really like the idea of the Rockets for John Collins on some level, if only because I think he would hold a lot of those younger guys accountable. He would be a better pick and roll threat for guys like Jalen Green and Kevin Porter. Kevin Porter particularly, I think, would be helped by having like an actual good downhill rim runner as opposed to Bruno Fernando, who doesn't always do that often well. So like, I wonder if that's a team like the Rockets, the Thunder, the Jazz. Those are the teams that might make a little bit more sense for John Collins.
I think that's getting at the right concept. You could also mention that if the Indiana Pacers made a Miles Turner trade, then you add a different pick and roll partner. Like you say, you basically, they're not the same player, but you could do something there. And I think John Collins is a better fit on a rebuilding team than a great team. That's generally been the issue. And especially because teams haven't defended well when John Collins has been at the 5. So he might be more of a floor raiser than a ceiling raiser when we're talking about real good teams. So yeah, I think that's an interesting concept, and that can make it harder for a deal to happen because how willing are those teams to give up assets unless what the Hawks are looking for is offloading some salary, maybe bringing in something, because the Thunder, you brought up those teams, they don't have a lot of players that can help Atlanta right now.
just like push back a little bit on John Collins, who I think is a guy that actually could help a winning team. I know that like the archetype of who he is as a player makes it a little bit harder to make like rosters function around him really well. It's funny, like I would almost go try to get him if I was the Pacers, if I was keeping Miles Turner. Because like I love the idea of using Miles as like a floor spacer, using like some weird like double drags, using some weird like Spain pick and roll actions where Collins is diving to the rim, Turner is popping out for three. Using Turner as your corner spacer, using Collins as your high level rim runner for Tyrese Halliburton. I also think that I think Collins has gotten better at the four defensively. I think he's actually
at the four, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's actually like pretty good at the four now. Like, he's not like a plus defender, but he is totally fine defensively at the four, especially when you account for what his offensive value can be as a rim runner, potentially as a floor spacer. I know the shooting has fallen off of a cliff this year, but prior to this 22% mark that he's been shooting over the previous 3 years, John Collins had shot 39% from three in 158 games times 4 3-point attempts per game. So I think the shooting is probably still there in limited volume. The rim running is super valuable. The rebounding is super valuable. I wonder, maybe the Pacers make a lot of sense for him if they do decide to keep a Miles Turner. But I wonder if that's the structure. I wonder if it's a team like that, the Thunder, the Rockets, the Jazz, the Pacers, a team that's building sees him as a guy that they can build with.
Yeah, and it's also fair to mention that Collins could fit in. I think he could fit in on a good team. It's just, where is he in the pecking order? If he's like your fourth or fifth best player, then how much are you going to give up to make that happen? And he's paid properly, if not overpaid, for that kind of a role.